years ago, but I was a freshman. And he was the publicity coordinator the year before, and he's very active with the MSA, very active with the Sacramento community. And if you guys could please welcome him, if you guys can help me welcome him to the stage.
Again, in the name of God, the most gracious and the most merciful. I want to begin by offering you all the Islamic greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum. So first of all, just since we had some really pertinent announcements, I want to talk about some of the things they talked about earlier, especially with that CCC position. I got here in Davis in 2008, and at that time we were talking about how we weren't involved enough in the CCC, how we didn't have a voice in administration, how we didn't have an opportunity to speak to a lot of our leaders on campus. And we fought for that. And we had been fighting for that as an MSA since early in the 2000s, like 2 generations of graduates before I got here. And to this day, we're still working in that direction. And it would be really unfortunate if our community right now, you guys didn't step up and fill that position. So I'm really hoping that somebody in this room, hopefully a couple of somebody, steps up, applies and goes and does that, because it's really important. And you might not know with everything going on right now, but America can attest it. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that most of us don't know about, but we're lucky that we have someone fighting on our behalf. And we really need that someone to be there. So back to what I was planning on speaking on. Since most of you guys are students, I wanted to talk about graduation. For most of you guys, that means it was something that happened in the last year or two when you graduate from high school, or something that's coming up in the next year or two when you're graduating from college. And what's really cool about graduations is that most everyone goes through one. And it's really similar regardless of where you go. You get your ticket, you show up, you're sitting there. If you're Pakistani, you're sitting there and wondering if your parents will get there on time.
That's true.
And for the most part they do. Mine got there about 5 minutes late, it was okay. And you're usually waiting to get up on stage. And as you're sitting there, you usually have this little pamphlet and you're reading through it and you flip through it and you find your name, you find your best friend's name, you find a couple other names. And you see the name of your major and you're looking at it and you're like, wow, I'm actually doing this. I actually have a bachelor's, a BS, or a BA, or a master's, a PhD, or whatever you're in. You're sitting there and you're like, wow, this is actually happening. And then you see the person at the end of your row, they tell your row to stand up, and you start walking towards the side, and you walk over there and slowly you walk up, you take your little picture with your fake diploma, and you just get onto the stage. And then you kind of go up there and there's one guy that gives you a hug and there's another guy who shakes your hand, and then you walk back down. And as you sit down, you realize nothing's changed. You're still just as intelligent as you were 10 minutes ago, or you're just as stupid as you were 10 minutes ago. And you're kind of in the same exact boat. Just because you had someone shake your hand on a stage and you had people taking your picture, nothing really changed within yourself. Just because you have a BS or a BA degree in this field doesn't mean you know it any better than you did 10 days ago. And in reality, most of our majors are structured in a way where we have to take certain classes. But at the end of 4 years, there's no competency exam. There's no kind of proof or no kind of test to know that what I took 2.5 years ago is something I still remember. That your degree says you know everything about, I was in psychobiology, so for psychobiology I know everything from A to Z right now. I might have known A and B my first quarter, I might have known, S to Z at another time, but at this moment I don't know everything. Even now when I'm looking up something in my field, I still have to Wikipedia it. And the truth of the matter is that that's not what college is about. They don't care if you have all this knowledge accumulated and stuck in your head for the longest time. What they care about is whether or not you took that class. Whether or not you had that experience when you're sitting in a classroom and you're put in a position where you're looking at material and wondering, how in the heck am I going to remember that 2 weeks from now when that midterm comes out? When you're sitting like a night before your midterm and you're wondering about like, can I get a C? And you're calculating your grade to be like, hey, what do I need to get a C and pass out this class? That's the position we've all been in, right? And those are the same people who graduate 4 years later with a degree that says, I know everything there is to know about this field. But in reality, it's about that experience. It's about stepping out of your comfort zone every once in a while, taking a class that you weren't looking forward to, and then getting through it. And honestly, that's what college is about. It's about stepping out of your comfort zone. It's about doing something that you might not want to have done when you stepped into college, but you realize 4 or 5 years later after you graduated. For example, a lot of my classmates, when we talk about our Davis days, we talk about the stuff we never thought we'd ever do. Whether that's standing up and being in part of like student government position, or it's about getting up at like a poetry slam and performing or whatever, they did something they didn't think they could do and now they look back to it favorably. And that's what MSA is kind of about too. It's about experiencing what it means to be part of a community. It's about standing up, being an American Muslim and being proud of it. On this campus, there's thousands of Muslims. There's probably less than 100 of us in here right now. We have masjid across the street. How many do we get for Jummah? Do we get even like 50% of the Muslims on this campus? And honestly, we don't. And there's a reason that you people in this room stepped up and decided that I'm going to be willing to identify as such and show up to Jummah, show up to this MSA meeting, and do these things that make you step out of a certain comfort zone. And there's two roles to MSA, really. You have that internal role when you guys are building community, you guys are really building an internal kind of strength and a place that you can be comfortable. But there's also this external role. We have to be real with ourselves. We live in a post-9/11 America where constantly we're bombarded with stuff on the news and stuff in the media and on our paper, on the internet, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, whatever, beating down on us. Beating on your nationalities, on your faith, on your culture, on the skin, on the language that you speak. So many aspects of who we identify as us is something that someone else uses as a point of attack. And that's just a reality that most of us grew up in. For most of us in this room right now, I think most of us were in middle school when 9/11 happened. We went through high school, we're going through college. We're moving through a world that our parents didn't know. And what's really important to recognize about this is that this stuff is going to be in the history book someday. 20 years from now, when our kids, inshallah, are in school, they're going to come home one day and they're going to ask about, Mom, Dad, remember, what are the King hearings about? I read about this guy, Peter King, in my paper, in my book today, about radicalized Muslim youth in 2009, 2010, 12, whatever, and they apparently, the government had hearings on it. Mom or Dad, what did you do? What did you feel like at that time? And when we're looking at them, we're going to need to give them an answer. They're going to ask what we did when we faced Islamophobia. Did we sign up for an MSA list? Did we put our name on a listserv and said, hey, send me emails, this is me doing my part? Did we show up to one GBM and thought, hey, I'm standing against the man and the evil, forces that are going against our faith and going against all that's good in the world, and I've done my part? Or did we stand up and actually engage in a certain activism, go out and become a leader in a certain community, talk to someone even? Did I attend a rally? Did I do all these different things that I could have? Or am I going to be standing there telling my kid, hey, I don't know, someone else took care of it for me. There were some leaders in the community that did it, and it was okay afterwards. But I think what's really important is, for me as an individual, I'm in the medical field, so I'm in healthcare and public health. A lot of what I do is looking into disparity within healthcare. So what that means is I'll be looking into different patient pools and looking to see if a certain group of people get more sick than another group of people. So if we look just at Muslims, for example, Muslim women who were pregnant in 2001, before and after in the 9/11 range, I think there was a 20% increase in the amount of underweight babies that were born at the same time of year after 9/11 compared to before. We see an uptick in depression. We see an uptick in work stress. We see a huge uptick in the amount of the violent crimes that children are exposed to, the amount of incidents at schools and hate crimes. So these things are happening. They're documented, they're scientific, and they're real. But what I really want to say is that we're 0.8% of the United States. And in this room, when we talk about social justice, we talk about this is what's happening to American Muslims, this is what's happening to Muslims in Syria, this is what's happening to Muslims in other parts of the world. But let's be real for a second, we're a small part of the community. We never talk about why it is that African Americans are incarcerated at such a high rate compared to white Americans, or even, say for my example, Pakistani Americans. We never talk about why an LGBT community is exposed to so many more kind of harmful acts and harmful for example, on our campus, I've been here when I've seen someone sit in the middle of the MU with the speaker in his hand and a sign in his right hand saying that everyone who's gay is going to hell, or everyone who identifies as such religion is going to be burning in hell. That's not okay. That's not even okay in Islam. There's no way for us to go out there and say certain things and tell people certain things without anyone standing up for what is right. A statistic that I recently was hearing at school was transgender students. It's something that we're all uncomfortable about. I can see the looks on people's faces right now. We don't like talking about this, but it's real. So transgender students, 50% of them have thought about suicide between the ages of 0 and 18. Think about that for a second, 50% of them. And our faith, our Quran reads it very clearly, if you save one life, it's like you saved every life. How many of us have stepped up and helped in that community? One that no one wants to talk about. We have that CCC that we were talking about earlier. On our way to that CCC that we walked to, or on our way to the prayer room, there's an LGBT center right to the right. I, for one, can say easily, as an undergrad, I didn't take one step in that room. I was only here while the CCC was open for a few months, half a year. But even though I was there for a limited time, I don't know if I felt comfortable going there and saying, hey, is there anything I can do? That doesn't mean that I accept every tenet that they believe in. It doesn't mean that I stand for everything that they stand in, but it does mean that there's a community that we can help. There's some things on this campus that we can stand up for and people that we can reach out to that we're not doing a good job of. And what I really wanted to talk about is a story from the Sunnah that really dates back, and I think it really hits home to what we're talking about today. And what we all know is the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, had a very strong ministry when he began in Mecca. So for his first 10 years that he was preaching, the first 3 years, it was mostly his family, his close relatives, people that are very close to him. And he would tell them things about character, about the oneness of God, about doing good and forbidding evil, and a lot of these very basic tenets of our faith. The next 4 or so years, he started speaking to more of the city, and he was ridiculed. He was made fun of. People who used to look up to him, and now they're making him a laughingstock of the community. But slowly and surely, he built up a following. People believed in what he was saying. So for the next 3 years, since he had a certain amount of people following, there was boycotts. People who followed him were shunned. People who were on his side, who were standing up to him, were not traded with. In a way, people essentially divested from everything that the Prophet stood for. And it was an economic kind of barrier that they were trying to do, and it wasn't working. But what also happened was there was violence at every level. One of the victims of this violence is someone that we still look up to today, someone that you'll hear some imams praying for after Jummah sometimes. This guy who ended up becoming one of the caliphs in our tradition. And up to the Prophet comes one of his closest friends, and Abu Bakr is walking up to him. And he asks him something that must have been really difficult for him to ask. And he says to him, "Can I move away?" And what he wants to do is he wants to move to Abyssinia. He wants to leave Mecca. He wants to leave the Prophet's company that he loves. There's a 50-year-old man. He's respected in this city. He's at the top of the social structure, and he really has had enough. He can't take it anymore. And what is it that drives him to that point? It's the fact that he's been beaten so many times. It's the fact that he doesn't feel safer anymore. It's the fact that he realizes that he can't continue doing this. To the point where this guy, when he walks up, he has scars on his face from the amount of times that he's been victimized and abused physically. There was a point where he was beaten so bad that he was knocked out cold for 3 days. Imagine that, for 3 days he was cold from a beating. And this isn't modern America when we have hospitals and whatnot. That's literally life and death at that point. And he's, after all these different experiences that he has, he walks up to the Prophet and he's essentially asking, "Can I leave? Can I get away?" And the Prophet in his mercy understands what is wrong here, what is going on, and he grants him that. And as he walks away, he has this really deep thought in his head of, how am I going to do this? How am I going to leave? And he knows that he has permission. So, he gets his things ready. He says his goodbyes and he begins to head out. So as the story goes, he's about a day out of the city at a certain point. And he runs into someone else. And this guy that he runs into is a leader of another tribe. And what you've got to understand is that this leader from the other tribe isn't a Muslim. He's not someone who supports the Prophet. He's not someone who stands for Islam. In fact, he's